Hello there guys, what is going on? Daniel Charles back here again for another edition of Added Time. Going to be answering your questions that you kindly submitted on the show, X at SonOfChelsea, and also on my YouTube community page. We've got some Arsenal related ones as we build up to the return of the Premier League and Chelsea at Stamford Bridge on Saturday night. I think I'm going on at least one Arsenal show this week to preview the game. That's on Thursday evening. We'll see if there are any more collabs going around, and I'll promote them on my socials. I hope you had a great weekend. I had a pretty busy weekend, literally flat out busy every single day. From Friday afternoon, Friday night, Saturday, traveling on Saturday, was busy Saturday night, went to the Isle of Wight on Sunday, which was quite an experience, and now back for the build up to Chelsea, really. And we've got a brilliant guest. I've got another great guest on for Dear Chelsea, my interview series, my new one. Go and listen to the full podcast I did with Gary Hayes. You can find a clip. Some of you really responded well to it. And we've got another brilliant Chelsea guest that I will be releasing a clip or two from that interview, and also the full extended conversation will once again be available on the podcast feed. But I mean, another thing to speak about before we get into your questions is I've got like a recently made cup of tea right here, and I'm using it to keep my hands warm, because in the UK, and I always joke about this and it sounds really stupid, probably the most stupid thing I have said and will say on camera, is I feel in the UK autumn is a bit of a myth. It's not some big conspiracy theory. It's just basically like I don't get it as like a serious period of the year, because you have summer, depending on the year whether it's good or bad, and then we have like 2 weeks of mild weather, and then you wake up one morning, usually mid to late October, and it's absolutely freezing. And then in my mind, we're basically in winter. When you're having to wear coats outside, we're basically in winter. And unfortunately, today feels like that day. The heating has had to come on much earlier than I wanted it to come on. And yeah, it's just any chance of any more warm weather that was kind of anticipated, gone now. We're fully into winter. The nights are drawing in. So if I don't move my hands, which I have a tendency to, it's because I'm trying to heat them through my cup of tea. But yeah, let's get into your questions, and hopefully some of your questions will at least not remind me how cold it is and how miserable the weather is likely to get. So let's start off here I believe this is via Twitter. Alexander CFC, that is, asking, are you happy with Colwill's positioning long term? Is left back a long term thing? We have discussed Colwill's positioning, and I don't think it is a long term thing, and I'm not too concerned that it is going to be that, because I just think time is on his side. He's a young player, and also time is not really on Thiago Silva's side, and I just get the sense that at the very least he will transition into a centre-back role this season, or in the long term will be that for Chelsea. I feel that there is also a reality that, you know, he's going to play in that left-back role, partly because he's done it well so far this season, partly because Pochettino has gone with that, but also because Ben Chilwell is going to be out injured for a period of time. You know, I'm still intrigued to see what happens with Ian Maatsen in the January window, what happens with Motka Correa, who I still don't think has a long-term future at Chelsea. So I just think naturally he will one day be in a centre-back role. But I said this the other week that I'd like to think he's going to come out of this a more rounded footballer, even if we all kind of feel his best role is as a left centre-back, either in a 4 or a 3. Seb C asks, team versus Arsenal. I'm not going to give away my team yet, and I'm not going to predict it this early. We're Monday afternoon when I'm recording this, and I've got my team selected that I'll do on Friday, where I'll give you the correct team to predict for Arsenal. The big thing I would say, just as an early answer to that question, is what happens at right back, and it was something we discussed in my post-match live stream after Burnley, where there was chatter about Reese being back, and there's been some chatter again over the international break over this past weekend of whether Reese is going to be ready or not. More positive stories that he is going to be ready, but I still I think this is a broader point of like Reese's fitness being a real big concern for me, and why I don't think it's a ridiculous thing to say that Malo Gusto will probably either equal or better Reese's appearances this season. I mean, he's already quite a bit ahead given Reese's injuries problem. And even with Malo Gusto getting suspended, yeah, I still think that Malo Gusto might just start against Arsenal because of fitness. And again, that's a big concern, because as much as people may say, let's not rush him back, when do you put him back into the firing line? Are you really going to wait until the Blackburn game, potentially until Reece James starts again? And we're basically into November then, which is just not a good look. So I think that's the big conversation to be had over this game. Other than that, I don't think I'm going to be alone in not, other than like if there are injury concerns to be had, I don't think there's going to be radical change, because why would there be after the recent performances? 3 questions here from Carney CFC. If Mount stayed, would he be captain over Reece? What do you think Carney's best position is? Do you see Carney as a starter as the season wears up? Obviously with a name like Carney CFC, I'm sure this is kind of the last two are obviously very relevant. In terms of if Mount stayed, I mean that's a hypothetical, and it's very hard to know, because Mount was obviously such a big character, but again, it's just, I guess it was the obvious next academy one. I think Pochettino would have liked Mason Mount a lot as a player, and I felt that, a bit like what I've said about Conor Gallagher, it just felt like a very natural fit between player and coach profile, and I thought that he would get a lot of minutes, so then maybe he would have, but we're not to know that. I think that just because Mount had the captaincy before doesn't mean that he'd instantly be given it again. So that's a difficult question for me to answer. I think the other two, I do have more thorough answers. I mean, I think the best position is as an attacking midfielder, and I think that could be as a 10 or as an 8. I think the current formation, if you're playing 2 8s, then obviously he fills one of those roles, or he can play just in behind the striker. I know people who have watched him a lot in the youth ranks say actually as a 6, in like a double 6, basically, he can play that role too. I think in senior football, what we've seen so far is coaches aren't really that willing to give him that role yet. Graham Potter played him when he was playing in a sort of, or either a 4-2-3-1 or a 3-4-2-1. He'd play him a lot higher. Pochettino has already done that too, and we see the impact he had against West Ham. So I think as an attacking mid, that's where he will play. In terms of as a starter, it's difficult, because if the team continues to play really well, then it's going to be difficult for him to get in front of, say, Cole Palmer, who's playing kind of that creative role in behind the striker at the moment. Conor Gallagher is obviously playing so much football at the moment. Enzo, Caicedo, are you taking either of those players out from a balance point of view? And on the left, Mudryk and Raheem Sterling, if they continue to produce and compete with each other, it's difficult. And the problem is with the current schedule, it's actually the worst thing about a schedule with less games, no European football, if the team's doing well, is if you're one of those fringe players, you really are struggling at times to get back into the team unless injuries strike, which, as we know from Chelsea, a Chelsea fan point of view, we know can happen. I feel like he will get absolute minutes. I think the 5 sub rule is great for fringe players and a chance to rotate the team. And given what he did before he got injured and during pre-season, I would like to think Pochettino would value that and bring him back into the team. And then it's about taking those opportunities. But he clearly is a talent, and it's hopefully he can quickly get back to the level of performance we saw just before his injury. And finally here, this is from the Blind Shooter 8240. Do you think we should still be looking at perhaps getting a more Chelsea standard goalkeeper in at some point? Sanchez has done well enough and has been competent, but I don't know how well he would do at the highest level. Should we get back into Europe anytime soon? Chelsea have clearly invested on 2 keepers, right? 2 young keepers in Gabslin for the long term, and Petrovic as well over the summer. And to have both of those keepers and to look at them for the long term, you need to appreciate that, especially with Slonina, who Chelsea fought off a lot of competition to sign him in the first place. Now, does he reach his potential? That's obviously a big question mark, as with any young player. but I'm sure they're hoping it's going to be like another Courtois situation in a few years' time. So then you're left with a difficult kind of conundrum, aren't you, in sort of who plays first choice. And maybe that's the idea with Sanchez, is he fits a style, stylistically, clearly can play in a team who has a lot of the ball. He's a decent enough Premier League goalkeeper to bring out some good stops, and probably from a physical point of view, a height point of view, he improves on what we had before with Kepa. So he can hopefully just be a steady hand. And then you don't know when Petrovic, when he gets his opportunity, what he's going to be like from a level. I know some people are really confident he could very quickly become number 1 too. So it's, in terms of that big goalkeeper signing, I'm not quite sure it's going to happen anytime soon, unless once again you're left with a really bad run of form from a keeper that sort of forces your hand on that. Because they didn't sign the big name this past summer that could have, if Onana came in, and I know he's having a really difficult time at the moment at Man United, maybe that would have been your answer. But I still think that because you've invested in young keepers, it leans me to believe that you are thinking about those players being the future of that position, and those players, kind of have to see that there is a realistic future. And it's such a difficult position, goalkeeper, because rotation is just not something you do in that role, frequently. It just doesn't happen unless, you're really, sort of don't have any trust in your current number 1 and you're constantly having to switch in. I know there was this debate a few weeks ago of Arsenal and Ramsdale and David Raya, and very quickly, even though there was a few games where those two were switching, it's now Raya. Raya is number 1, because it's not the same as any outfield position where you can, if you have a heavy schedule, you're going to rotate those players in and out. So it becomes a bottleneck, right? If you are number 2, if you're a young number 2 and you're trying to compete with a settled number 1, it makes it very challenging. And why the Czech Courtois situation only lasted for a season, because Czech felt at his level that he could still play Premier League football for a number of years, and he did that at Arsenal. So that's why it's a delicate position, and why I'm not so sure a big signing will come in. And I'm actually confident that Sanchez, I'm not calling Sanchez, world class or absolutely elite, or maybe even better than what we had with Edouard Mendy, but I think he's a competent solution for the time being. And will we actually go out and sign someone bigger? I'm not sure. But that is it for today's edition of Added Time. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you for submitting your questions, and I'll be back again very soon. Hit that subscribe button, turn those notifications on. I also want to I shouted this out at the start of my last video, MOTM Football. You can use my affiliate link. It really helps the show out. Go and get yourself a nice Chelsea gift. They've got brilliant Chelsea frames related to the 2 Champions League final wins, Chelsea legends. There's t-shirt. I believe there's more designs and mugs coming too. So get yourself a Chelsea gift. And as I say, if you use the affiliate link, SonOfChelsea, in the description box below, you're helping the channel out too. But that is it. And I will see you again very soon. All the best.